When you are so used to dynamics of control, these dynamics that, started in early childhood because trust was broken or whatever the case may be, it's very not easy at all, to say the very least, to, decondition yourself from that. You learned safety through control. However, it was never real safety, right? But you learned also that you can't trust people, so therefore you learned to control. And this control that you feel you need is actually a hindrance more than anything because it's stopping you from further developing and actually holding authentic relationships with people. It's really strange. I I've been sitting with it recently, and I've been just sitting with the energy of letting go of trying to control things, letting go of like attachment to outcomes and everything. And it's so interesting how all of that kind of stuff, it really goes back to childhood and the things that traumatized in childhood. When you don't learn, you know, trust in a real authentic way. And I'm so interested too because as I learn about different things like communication, right? Like consistent, open, clear communication, all that kind of stuff, I recognize how vacant that has been throughout my entire life and how when you actually, like utilize that, it transforms how you experience life. It transforms how you experience life for yourself, for, your relationships and all. And it's so interesting because there are things that I'm learning now that I didn't know or utilize a long time ago, and I'm recognizing that the way that my relationships unfolded back then looked a very specific way, and there's a reason that they looked that way. You know, but control. When I say control, I'm talking about like the actual like manipulative stuff, right? I'm not talking about any other type. I'm talking about the type that you learned because you learned also that you couldn't trust people, which is not true. It's just that you learned that you couldn't trust people because people do this or that, right? Because your early childhood taught you that people are this way or that they're that way. Doesn't mean that they actually are. It just means that that's what it taught you. So, kind of like questioning that narrative is what's important because the narrative is not true. It's not accurate. It's not real. It's just an idea. It's an illusion based on what you learned at that point in your development, and that traumatized you, and it taught you a belief that in order to hold relationships with people, you have to control because there's no such thing as real trust because trust is at some point inevitably going to be broken, and then it just results in the same thing over and over again. It's a cycle. So kind of like sitting with that and recognizing what that is very important, and it transforms the dynamics when you really sit with it. Trust is real. Just because you learned at an early age that you can't trust people doesn't mean that you actually can't. It just means that there are people out there that you know exhibit behaviors that if you look at it, you're going to be like, yeah, I can't trust that person. Okay, then you can't trust that person. That's okay. That doesn't mean that the world is untrustworthy. Um, it's just so interesting. I'm very interested in how like when one thing happens in one experience, the whole is painted as that. It's like, all right, well, listen, it's not that way. You need to take a step back from what messed you up early on in life and recognize that not everyone is like that and that there are people out there that you can put your trust in who will fulfill your trust, who will be there as they say they're going to, who will do the healthy thing, the stable and safe thing. That's just real. You know, painting the whole as accordance with this one experience that you had. I'm not going to label it big or small. I'm not here to, compare, contrast, validate, invalidate. Um, well, I'll leave validate out of there, but it's just, it's real. It's totally real. That's just the reality of it. Um, but here's the most important thing to understand. Many of us, as a result of trauma, childhood trauma, learned defense mechanisms, right? Examples: projection, displacement, sublimation, if you're an artist, that is. Um, these defense mechanisms defend us against reality. Denial is a good one, right? The proof could be right in front of your eyes. You're denying that reality, right? Um, defense mechanisms are not meant to help us out for the long term. Defense mechanisms are there because we learned these things early on in childhood when we were traumatized. However, we're meant to heal through these things, and we're meant to recognize them for what they are, and then deploy and utilize healthier means, right? Bringing our awareness and our energy back on ourselves, doing the work, recognizing that it wasn't our faults, and then going from there. Um, yeah, defense mechanisms, they're not going to help you out over the long term. I like to look at it this way. What got you out of drowning is not going to fly you up to the moon. It just doesn't work that way. So maybe in survival, defense mechanisms stopped you from drowning, right? But what they're not going to do is fly you up to the moon and give you an excellent life. That's just the reality.